Perhaps the public service that has been most upended is the Portland Police Bureau. Between deep cuts in funding, the dissolution of the gun violence task force, and the mass exodus of officers, the force has been unable to respond to the needs of the city.
It wasn't always this way. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Oregon was actually regarded as a leader in the criminal justice system. But in 2011, Oregon had an alarming 47% spike, a really, really large increase in incarceration, as well as this big spike in low-level drug offenders being incarcerated. And it's this increase in incarcerations that demanded more state funding to be invested into its prison and jail systems as the state continued to disinvest in prevention and rehabilitative services. This was particularly true during the urban renewal phase of the 90s. And these increases in 2012 were the very reason that the Department of Justice got involved, and the Portland Police Bureau found themselves under federal investigation for the problematic patterns of excessive force. From the protests alone in 2020, there's been a recorded 433 uses of pepper spray, 1,566 munitions fired, like rubber bullets, 216 people struck by batons, and over 6,000 incidents of reported brutality that we know of.
In public safety and livability over the last several years since the defunding and dismantling occurred. The outcome of gun violence, homelessness, and their increases indicate that the city is experiencing an issue of crisis that requires immediate intervention. All of these factors were argued by city leadership to justify the process of not only defunding the PPB, but also dismantling parts of the Bureau itself. And what that means is, in addition to the $18 million funding cut that occurred to the department, it also included dissolving and dismantling various departments and units of the PPB itself. And really what that means is that there were staffing reductions. People were asked to resign. Entire units and departments were dissolved, and their level of jurisdiction was limited. So they weren't able to go to specific situations and respond to certain calls that came in from constituents that needed help. Largely calls that would require some type of behavioral or crisis intervention. And so this dismantling and dissolving of their responsibilities, their jurisdiction, and redefining what the police were able to do and what they were not. But the staff reduction would determine if they had the manpower to respond. When considering what programs have been implemented or experimented in Portland to help fill the void of the gap left by the Portland Police Bureau, one exception is Portland Street Response. This was a pilot program and response team piloted back in February of 2021, so about a year ago. It's immensely popular among residents, which indicates to me that local Portlanders really do want a community-driven, citizen-led policing program that they can be involved in directly. This team, it was designed to respond to situations that involve trauma and use of crisis interventionalist specialists that typically have like social work backgrounds. So the kind of main idea behind response, or PSR for short, is that they use empathy when working with emergencies over the formal punishment-based situation that was often used by the Portland Police Bureau. Noted that there are some efforts that indicate a citizen-based policing program is possible to implement. Policing or community policing program or framework describes the collaboration between the police and the community in which they work together to identify and solve community problems. I think what makes it a little bit more different is that my vision of community or citizen-based policing framework, citizens are autonomous and can respond to non-threatening emergency situation. Kind of the key idea, the key theory behind this is that we take away the dependence that they have to have on crisis intervention specialists, because that is not something that you necessarily I don't believe that is a technical expertise. I genuinely believe that almost anybody can practice Clara, almost anybody can learn these skills, and the earlier you start and you start putting them in the schools and teaching children really young about these, the more natural they will be. But this is really just establishing some behavioral norms, and so if we integrate this as just very common general education and integrate this into our workspaces, I genuinely believe that will reduce a big amount of people needing to call the police or formal emergency responders, because a lot of times the emergencies that we encounter in Portland have to do with people suffering from psychosis. Maybe it's drug induced. Maybe it's just something that they are struggling with long term as far as a psychological ailment or disorder or condition. And I think a lot of times it becomes more of a crisis and emergency because people are scared and people don't know what to do. And so at the heart of this community-based policing that I envision is giving people back their power by giving them the knowledge to know what to do in those situations.